Somewhere around midnight, someone rereads a message they already have memorized. It's 3 weeks old, sent back when things were new enough, and now that words still needed saying out loud. "I choose you," the person had written plainly, without being asked twice. By now it could be recited without looking at the screen. And still lying in the dark with the phone dimmed against their chest, they wait, not for the sentence to repeat itself exactly, but for the feeling underneath it to finally catch up and believe it. It hasn't caught up, not fully. Somewhere between reading the words and feeling settled by them, something goes missing every time. The words arrive right on schedule. The relief never quite does. This isn't a story about being unwanted. If anything, it's the reverse. Chosen clearly, chosen often, chosen in writing more than once, by someone who has never given a real reason to doubt it. Which is what makes the next part hard to admit out loud. If being wanted was supposed to end the fear of not being enough, why does that fear keep showing up at exactly the moments there's the most proof against it? It shows up in small places first. A reply that takes longer than usual, and the mind quietly starts drafting reasons before there's any real evidence to draft them from. A tone that reads slightly flatter than yesterday's, and somewhere in the chest, a small alarm goes off before the sentence is even finished. Nothing about it looks dramatic from the outside. It looks like glancing at a phone one more time than necessary, or rereading an old exchange, because doing that for a few minutes makes the doubt sit down. Ask someone in the middle of this what they're doing, and they'll usually have a reasonable answer ready. Just checking in. Just making sure things are okay. Just being careful after everything. All of that sounds sensible enough that it rarely gets questioned, including by the person saying it. But underneath just being careful runs something more like negotiation, trying to earn a few hours of calm by confirming one more time that the door is still open. And for a while, it works. A warm reply lands and something in the body actually settles. The relief is real, which is part of what makes this hard to name as a pattern instead of a personality trait. The checking isn't irrational, it produces results. The chest unclenches, the evening feels lighter. It's only later, the next day or the next time a reply takes 10 extra minutes, that the same question reopens, as if the previous answer had come with an expiration date built into it from the start. That's the trap. It isn't only romantic either. The same shape turns up in someone who finally gets the promotion after months of being passed over, who still refreshes their inbox before every review, bracing to be told it was a mistake. It turns up in someone folded into a friend group they used to watch from outside, who still rereads a group message twice for signs they're quietly being phased out. Different rooms. Same question running underneath. Does this most recent proof of being wanted finally settle it? Somewhere in all of this, most people have already tried the obvious advice. Let it go. Stop overthinking. You are already enough. Said with good intentions and mostly useless in the moment it's needed, because it treats the fear like a missing fact, as though the person simply hasn't heard the news yet that they're worthy. But the checking doesn't happen because someone forgot a fact. It happens faster than any fact could be recalled, somewhere in the half-second before thinking even starts. Telling that reflex to relax rarely works. Mostly it just adds a new discomfort on top of the old one, feeling foolish for still needing what you were already told you shouldn't need. Underneath the checking sits a pattern that isn't really about the other person at all, even though it looks that way from the inside. Each time reassurance gets sought, a message reread, a tone reanalyzed, a question asked twice in slightly different words. What's actually being requested is a verdict. Not affection, a ruling, some sense that the matter has finally been decided permanently in the asker's favor. and whoever is being asked without quite realizing it has been cast as a judge with the authority to close the case for good. The trouble is that no one actually holds that authority, reliable or not. A verdict on someone's worth isn't a thing another person can issue. They can offer warmth, they can offer commitment, attention, years of consistent behavior. What they can't offer is a final ruling that ends the trial, because the trial itself belongs in a different court to begin with. This is where it gets easy to misread as a character flaw. Too anxious, too needy, too much. It isn't that, or isn't only that. It looks more like someone refiling the same case in a new courtroom every time a relationship, a job or a friendship shows up, hoping this judge will finally make the ruling stick. And for a moment, a favorable ruling does land. It just doesn't stay filed, because the case can always be reopened. An appeal can always be requested, and there's always a next silence, a next slow reply, a next flat tone waiting to be submitted as new evidence. The wanting isn't the problem here. Wanting to be chosen, wanting closeness, wanting someone to stay, there's nothing there that needs fixing. Underneath the wanting sits a belief that could use a closer look, that somewhere out there is a verdict clear enough, a person convincing enough that the case finally gets closed for good. That belief is what keeps sending the same file back to court. Being chosen answers one question. It tells you that right now, someone wants you. It was never built to answer the older question underneath all the checking, whether you are enough, full stop, independent of anyone's decision. Those are two different questions. A person can win the first one completely, the way this one already has, and still feel the second one sitting there, untouched, because no answer about someone else's preference could ever reach a question about your own worth. What verdict are you still waiting for? And who exactly did you decide had the authority to deliver it? This particular kind of hope couldn't fully deliver. That's not a flaw in the people being asked to deliver it. In early Buddhist teaching, craving is described as reaching for something and expecting it to hold still, to stay exactly as reassuring as it felt the moment it was given. But almost nothing holds still. Moods shift for reasons that have little to do with anyone's feelings. Attention wanders. Even in the steadiest relationship, warmth has an ordinary rhythm to it, rising and falling for reasons as unremarkable as a bad night's sleep or a hard day at work. That's not betrayal. It's just impermanence, up close. In any bond between two people who are both still alive and still changing. Asking a single answer to stay permanently settling, expecting one message, one promotion, one invitation into the group to end the questioning for good, is asking something changeable to behave like something fixed. It can't. That's not because it's insincere, it's because nothing conditional on another person's ongoing choice was built to be permanent in the way the fear is asking for. That isn't a discouraging fact once it's actually taken in. It's a relief, if anything, because it means the exhausting search for proof solid enough to never need checking again could never have succeeded, no matter how good the evidence got. The goal wasn't unreachable because of bad luck. It was unreachable because it was the wrong goal. There's an old teaching, sometimes traced to the earliest Buddhist texts, about two arrows. The first is whatever actually happens. A reply comes later than expected, plans shift, someone changes their mind about something small. That arrow lands whether anyone is ready for it or not, because nothing stays fixed forever, including the most sincere affection. The second arrow is optional. It's the story built on top of the first one, the rereading, the rehearsal of worst outcomes, the treating of an ordinary delay as though it were a verdict already delivered. The first arrow usually can't be avoided. The second one, more often than it seems in the moment, can at least be noticed before it's thrown. The next time the urge to check shows up, the pull to reread a message, to reopen a conversation that already ended, to ask the same question again in slightly different words. It's worth pausing before reaching for the phone. Not to force the urge away, just to notice where it's actually sitting. For a lot of people it's somewhere in the chest or the jaw, tight in a way that got there before any conscious decision was made. One slower exhale, long enough to notice that tightness without immediately fixing it, is often enough to tell the difference between an urge that needs acting on and an urge that just needs a few seconds to pass. Not every alarm going off is reporting something true about the present moment. Some of them are just old alarms, still wired, still going off on schedule. Alarm is worth slowing down on for a second, because underneath it sits the piece this has all been circling without naming yet. The fear itself isn't the thing to be solved. It's closer to a smoke alarm that's gone off so many times over steam from a hot shower that it now sounds at the smell of toast. Loud, exhausting, badly calibrated, but not defective in the way it feels. Somewhere earlier, that alarm was protecting something real. Maybe it learned its sensitivity during an earlier version of being chosen that didn't hold a friendship, a family, a relationship where the ground genuinely did move. An alarm that's sensitive isn't proof that something is wrong with the person carrying it. It's evidence that at some point, something worth protecting against actually happened, which changes the actual goal. Finding a chosenness solid enough to make the alarm go silent for good was never really the target. That's the trap the whole search has been quietly built on. A smoke alarm can't be argued with. It doesn't run on evidence, or not only on evidence, it runs on old wiring. What can change slowly is how much authority gets handed to it when it goes off. Whether every ring counts as an emergency serious enough to require immediate proof, immediate reassurance, immediate certainty before the evening can continue, or whether it's allowed to just ring for a minute and pass. That's a different project than the one most people start with. Most people start by trying to become secure enough, chosen well enough that the alarm stops sounding entirely. It rarely works that way. The more honest version is learning to keep functioning, keep choosing presence, keep showing up to the relationship or the job or the friendship, with the alarm occasionally going off somewhere in the background, still audible, just no longer in charge of the evening. None of this is an argument for caring less. Loosening the alarm's authority isn't the same as pretending. The relationship, the job, or the friendship doesn't matter. That would just trade one kind of self-protection for another, numbness standing in for peace. Non-attachment in the way it actually gets used in Buddhist thought doesn't mean wanting less. It's about not requiring a guaranteed outcome before being willing to stay present for the one that's actually happening. Someone can want deeply to be chosen and still stop demanding proof of it before they're able to enjoy an ordinary Tuesday evening. This is a line that gets blurred easily in both directions, and it deserves to be drawn more carefully. Accepting that no verdict is coming isn't the same as giving up on the relationship, deciding it's doomed, or quietly withdrawing to avoid future disappointment. That's not acceptance. That's fear wearing a calmer outfit. Real acceptance looks more ordinary than that. It looks like reading a slightly shorter reply than usual and staying in the room instead of building a case, because a slightly shorter reply on its own isn't much of a case to begin with. Silence isn't automatically a message either, though the anxious mind treats it that way by default. Sometimes a slow reply is exactly what it looks like. Someone in a meeting, someone asleep, someone simply not looking at their phone. Reading it as a verdict every time is choosing the most painful interpretation available, and then reacting to that interpretation as though it had already been confirmed. That habit deserves a plainer name than instinct or preparation. It's an old alarm, getting mistaken for information. old carries more weight than it first sounds because it points to where a lot of this actually began. For a lot of people, this particular fear didn't start with the relationship, the job, or the friend group currently being scrutinized for signs. It started somewhere earlier, sometimes so early there's no clear memory attached to it, just a general sense that affection has always needed to be maintained rather than simply received. Maybe there was a stretch of growing up where being chosen depended on mood or performance or luck. Maybe it was an earlier relationship that really did end, the way this one is quietly being braced for. Either way, the current person, the current job, the current friend group usually isn't where the fear began. They're just the newest place it's showing up. That distinction matters, because it explains something that otherwise looks like a contradiction. How someone can be with a genuinely steady, genuinely honest person and still feel unsteady inside it. The instinct is to read that as evidence the relationship is somehow wrong or not enough or missing something. Usually it isn't. It's evidence that the alarm was calibrated somewhere else, at another time by someone or something that isn't even in the room anymore. The current person is being asked to out-argue a fear they didn't create, and can't fully see that's an unreasonable job for anyone, however devoted. This isn't about assigning blame and stopping there. It's about putting the responsibility in the right place. The old alarm isn't the current partner's job to fix. It isn't entirely the current person's fault for still having it either. It's simply the shape of the work, noticing where an old file got reopened in a courtroom that has nothing to do with the actual case sitting in front of it right now. Everything up to here has mostly been about managing the alarm, noticing it, breathing through it, deciding how much authority to hand it. There's a question sitting underneath all that management, and it's less comfortable. The problem here isn't a shortage of good evidence. There's already been plenty of it in whatever form the choosing has taken: messages, actions, years, a promotion, an invitation into the group. A weak case isn't what's kept this going. It's that the case itself was built on a premise that can't hold any verdict steady. That worth is the kind of thing a courtroom can rule on in the first place. It isn't. Worth doesn't improve with better evidence, and it doesn't collapse under a bad review, a slow reply, or a relationship that eventually ends. No one had grounds to put it on trial in the first place, no matter how convincingly it's been treated that way for years. What's needed isn't a stronger case. It's closing the file. The outcome still matters, but the entire proceeding was aimed at the wrong question from the very beginning. If no one ever chose you again, starting tomorrow, what would still be true about you? Nobody answers that honestly on the first hearing. It probably won't get answered all at once, any more than tonight's message will read differently than it did 3 weeks ago just because it's been reread again. What can start sooner is smaller than an answer. It's noticing the next time the urge to check arrives that the file is being reopened again, and choosing just this once not to argue the case tonight. The fear may still show up tomorrow, that's likely, and it isn't a sign that any of this has failed. An old alarm doesn't get rewired by being understood one time. What changes gradually is how much of the evening it gets to run. What's actually uncertain doesn't go away because of any of this. People do leave, jobs do end, friend groups drift, sometimes for reasons that have nothing to do with anyone's worth, and sometimes for reasons that do. Nothing here guarantees that the current chosenness will last, and it isn't supposed to. What's within reach isn't a guarantee. It's a different relationship with the not knowing, one where uncertainty gets to exist without being treated as an emergency requiring resolution before the evening can continue. The part that was always within reach isn't whether another person keeps choosing them. It's whether the next slow reply gets treated as a verdict, or as, most of the time, exactly what it looks like. It's whether the case keeps getting reopened, or whether, every so often, it's allowed to stay closed for one more evening. That's smaller than the fear wants and larger than it sounds. The old question, am I enough, doesn't get answered by anyone else's choice, including a good one. It simply isn't the kind of question a choice can answer. It gets answered slowly and unevenly by how someone treats themselves on the nights no one is choosing them at all, and by how much authority they're willing to keep handing to an alarm that's doing its best with old information. One place to start is small enough to actually do tonight. Before sleep, write one sentence about yourself that has nothing to do with anyone choosing you. Nothing about a relationship, a job offer, or an invitation into any group. Something true regardless of who happens to be in the room. It won't feel like much. It isn't supposed to close the case in one sitting. It's just one line of evidence that doesn't depend on a verdict from anyone else, sitting in the file for once. Somewhere around midnight, someone sets a phone down without rereading the message underneath it. The fear hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there, quieter than usual, the way an old alarm sometimes is on an ordinary night. But the message doesn't need to be reread this time. It didn't stop mattering. It just was never built to close a case like this one. If any part of this sounded familiar, it might be worth naming, at least to yourself. What's the case you've been re-arguing every time someone new shows up to hear it? One word is enough, left below if you want to leave it anywhere at all. Knowing the difference between the two questions is one thing. Building an answer to the real one on the evenings no one else is in the room to offer it is the slower work this leads to next.